Good afternoon, everyone, and excuse me, welcome to our Thursday webinar series. We are so glad that you are here. We'd like to just first off thank you for taking the time out of your day to spend time with us. Today's topic, we're going to talk about optimizing GPT, considering AEO and GEO. I am your host, Jessica Walker with Care Sherpa. Glad to have you. With me today are two partners in crime, Diane Hammonds of WG Content and Matt Sear of Loop Consulting. This crew came together as we all in our own respective areas have been talking about the rise of GPT and how it's impacting patients and patient acquisition. And we thought it was high time to start the conversation and share with all of you some of the insights that we've learned from each of our perspectives. We're going to walk you through a couple of different angles so that you can start thinking about how to impact your practice or your clinic to make sure that you are showing up with patient search and GPT. So to kick us off, I want to introduce Matt. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is great. I'm excited to join the conversation, and this is such a timely and topical session today. So thrilled to do it. I guess I'm going to get us started. Start my video. Let's do that. That's me. All right. Let me join in here. Place current share. Okay. That into presentation mode, and we are off. Great to be here with all of you here today. And we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. But I want to kick us off here. Diane and Jessica will jump in, really adding some wonderful detail about the current state of AEO, GEO, and just search behavior in general. But I want to start with a look at both where we are today with AI, but also really looking back a little bit to see how we can learn from the social media revolution and take some lessons forward with us that I think can be instructional and helpful as we wrestle with a lot of change in a very short period of time. So to dig in here, of course, we all feel like AI is changing everything, right? Everything is moving very quickly, and it can feel confusing. It can feel like we're not really sure what's real and what's not. And it can feel a little chaotic. But this, of course, is not the first time that there has been a marketing revolution. And I go back to the sort of early 2010s when Facebook in particular, but social media more generally, really came on to the scene. And so I want to jump into the Wayback Machine with everyone here for just a few minutes, because I think there's some really wonderful lessons to be had from those early days of the social media explosion. So let's go back in the Wayback Machine, and we're gonna stop off here in 2010. At that point, I was working for Boston Children's Hospital. I spent a dozen years of my career there, involved in content creation, social media, started our Facebook page, started our first blog, and really tried to embrace opportunities to connect with our audiences in lots of new ways. And so when Facebook in particular launched, it was something that we really wanted to try and understand how to utilize it, but also really critically, how to do it in a way that felt good for us as a brand, felt protective of our brand, but of course, very protective of our patients and their families. And so we were, and I think as we are here today with AI, really trying to find our way forward amidst a lot of very fast moving change. But one of the things that to me was really powerful about Facebook and why we really wanted to embrace it so fully was that, and these are actually slides from a presentation that I did in 2010, talk about going into the Wayback Machine. This is a really compelling example of, on the right-hand side here, why we wanted to do this, because it really opened up the door for us to have another channel and set of channels to communicate with the public and with our patient families, but also for them to communicate with us and to share their experiences publicly, and the things that they loved about being at Boston Children's, or even sometimes the things that they didn't necessarily love. And as I like to say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. This is the presentation that I did a long time ago. This will give you a sense of how old I am, and hopefully that my design skills have improved just a little bit in the last 15 years. But the idea here was, thinking about Facebook as a place for connection, but not going into it sort of blindly, and really doing it as a way to support the overall brand and business goals of the org. There were, of course, concerns, as there are today, with social media at the time, right? We were concerned about negative comments, right? We all worried about someone posting something on Facebook that was negative about the hospital. We even had a committee that we had established around how to respond if someone posted a negative comment. Should we reply to it? Should we not? Should we try to get it taken down? For those of you who are listening and were involved in this phase of the social media explosion, I think you'll remember that there was a lot of worry and anxiety around how best to interact with people on social media, because it really could lead to some challenging and really unprecedented experiences. As with today, libel and defamation challenges are out there. How are employees using these technologies versus the organization? HIPAA, of course, the ever-present challenge. Are people giving medical advice or taking medical advice from these channels? Misinformation, of course, is an even bigger problem today than it was then. And losing control. Again, for those of us who were used to the early 2000s marketing communications landscape, we felt very much in control of our brand. We were able to put what we wanted on our websites. We were able to send out emails the way we wanted. We were able to control what messages went out in the media. And so Facebook and other channels were very different for us. And so we really had to adjust to a new experience. But as with today, the business case for doing so was very much relevant. At that point, again, this is 2010, 2012 in this case. A third of consumers at that point were using social media for health-related activities. I'll show you some data here in a minute that show a similar adoption here in the AI era. 40% seeking reviews of treatments and physicians, 45% saying social sources of information would affect their decision making, and 73% would use social tools to make an appointment or to ask a question. So again, even though this is now 13 years on, all of this really could be brought very fully into the conversation today as it relates to AI. So, social media really forced us to think and act differently. I mentioned the loss of control. It really did require us to think about what we needed to control and what we didn't, and how to respond if there were issues, and how to communicate effectively with our patient families in ways that felt helpful to them. We had to learn how to be able to deal with people saying negative things about us in public forums. This has become sort of par for the course here today. And, there's entire departments devoted to sort of brand management and reputation management. But this was in a lot of ways new back in the 2010s. And so we had to really wrestle with, again, that lack of control. And then finally, and I say this sort of for the first time, we had to really think about how consumers wanted to be communicated with. We were very used to a one-way conversation. We were putting stuff out in the world, and it was just being consumed by the patients and their families. But social media really flipped that script so that it was them also being able to both communicate with us directly, but also being able to tell us how they wanted to be communicated with, whether it was tweeting at them, whether it was sending Facebook messages, whatever the case may be. It really began, to me, a significant shift in the relationship, the power dynamic in the relationship between the organization and the consumer, which, of course, today continues even more. So in a lot of ways, right, AI is no different than social media was those years ago. But there is, of course, one major exception here, and it's how fast AI is moving. I think we all inherently get the feeling that it's moving quickly, and we feel sort of inundated by news and change. But I wanted to show some data here that shows the speed for different types of sort of revolutions and technologies to reach 100 million users. And let's start with electricity of all things. That took about 900 months to reach 100 million users. Computers, of course, a massive revolution in how we think and work and act, 264 months. The internet, full 84 months, which I think is, my math's not great, but probably about 7 years for that to have been reaching 100 million users. Smartphones, 66 months. Facebook, 54, back to Facebook again. Instagram, of course, picking up the pace at 30 months. TikTok, very quick, getting us there in 9 months. And I would say probably not a lot of surprise to those of us on this conversation, 2 months for ChatGPT to go from 0 to 100 million users. No wonder so many healthcare marketers are not sure how to feel about AI. I do a lot of work with hospital and healthcare marketing communications teams. And whenever I do that, I do a survey of usage and adoption and attitudes. And one of the things that I love is hearing the quotes from folks about how they think about AI. These are all verbatim quotes from a client. I don't love AI, but you can't stop a speeding train. Best to learn how to ride it. I view use of AI as a sad inevitability. No point in resisting. Takes the enjoyment out of work. Certainly not anything that we want people to be feeling, but I guarantee you that there are folks who are feeling that way in the social media era. And then finally, I've embraced AI with equal parts caution and optimism. And I think all of us, frankly, feel this way, right? We are excited about the potential, but we also are trying to pick our way forward and do this in a way that is safe and effective and doesn't sort of completely change our worlds in no time flat. So we know what the marketer thinks, right? We know how they feel about AI. But I also now want to ask the question, how is it impacting the healthcare consumer? This is what we're here to talk about today. And both Diane and Jess will dive into some really wonderful specifics and details. But I want to start at a little bit of a high level here. We know this inherently, but it is shaping their expectations for experience every day. When they log into Microsoft or whatever their email platform is, they are getting inundated with messages to use Copilot or get help, writing an email or organizing their day or reviewing their notes or starting a presentation. This is something that is now become ubiquitous in everyone's daily work and professional and personal lives. As is, what I'm calling or what's called zero-click search and now one-click shopping. I'll talk more about this here in just a moment, but Perplexity really changed the game about a year and a half ago with this idea of zero-click search, where you can get the information that you're looking for within the context of your search itself and not necessarily having to click through. But they also last year released what they call one-click shopping, where you can, as you see here, taking an image of something, loading it into Perplexity, it will identify where to find that product online. And if it's available through one of their partners, you can literally buy that product with a single click without ever having to leave the Perplexity interface. So these are the experiences that your consumers are having and are shaping the expectations that they bring to their interactions with you. We also know that it's impacting their clinical experience, right? More and more AI is being used as a diagnostic tool. I think we've all heard the stories about radiology and how, in many cases, AI can be a more effective diagnostic using radiological techniques than a human physician or radiologist. And so this is becoming much more part of the day-to-day lexicon, as is the idea of ambient AI. For those who may not be familiar with this term, it's simply the idea that there are now recording devices increasingly showing up in exam rooms where the physician is relying on an AI-driven recorder to document the interaction with the patient. That documentation then gets automatically and dynamically moved into the EMR, where it's summarized, next steps are categorized, and the physician, the clinician, the nurse, et cetera, is then really freed up to have more time with the human being to really connect in the ways that all of these clinicians really got into the business for. So it's impacting the clinical experience in significant ways. And of course, we know this, but it's really impacting search behavior. This is a Press Ganey study from earlier this year. 43% of respondents say that they're using AI to research medical conditions. 42% are using it to explore treatment options, 35% to find healthcare providers, and 31% to literally schedule appointments in real time. So again, if you go back to the earlier time part of this conversation around the Facebook data, this is a really similar set of data where people are very quickly adopting these two new technologies to help them find and acquire the care that they need in a timely and really efficient manner. So definitely, again, something that all of us need to be considering as we think about experience. And I think another large trend here is that this is really about less search, more answers. Those of you who are familiar with Perplexity and increasingly the other large language models, this will look familiar to you. This is a search that I put in yesterday saying that my elbow started to hurt yesterday after playing tennis, felt worse this morning. What should I do? I live in Charleston. Where should I seek medical attention? And what's really wonderful about this experience is that it's putting these resources in front of you. It's letting you know you can look at images from the web, but it's also giving you sources so that you can get the proof that these are legitimate sources of information and not hallucinations or sort of low rent options for you to choose from. It's giving you reasons to seek medical attention within the flow here. It's telling you the kinds of things that are important to pay attention to. It's saying, look, if it got worse since yesterday, you probably need to consider going to see someone, right? Here's an orthopedic specialist or a sports med doctor, or even an emergency room. That may be something for you to consider. But if the pain is moderate, just start with some at-home remedies and see if that will help. And so you as a consumer can decide for yourself without ever having to click through, is this enough for me? Or do I in fact feel like I need to go see an orthopedist somewhere here in Charleston? If you click on that, you'll get dropped into the next phase of the communication. Again, still within the Perplexity interface, starting to outline specific places where you can get orthopedic care in this market. And what I love about this is that these recommendations are based on ratings and reviews. This is not just who happens to have, bought their way to the top of a ranking list. This is really based on the consumer finding value in these particular organizations. And so this is a really powerful tool to really drive people into an organization. But again, at this point, the consumer has not even clicked a single link to go anywhere. The other piece of this that's really important is voice. Increasingly, we're seeing that voice is driving large language model search activity. And the compelling thing about this is that we're seeing data that's showing 2 to 3 times longer searches using voice. Just think about how we all talk and how we speak into our devices. It makes sense that this becomes more conversational, longer. And so as you think about the content that you create, you want to be mindful of that behavior and how people are asking those questions. There's also a really significant 60% increase in voice searches in languages other than English. Especially when it comes to medical care, we want to be able to provide resources to people in the language and in the way that they feel most comfortable, so that there's no mistranslations or misunderstandings. So be thinking about the multilingual side of all of this. And of course, all of this contributing to a significant decrease in organic clicks on healthcare websites. This is something that we're seeing all over the place. Google organic traffic is dropping basically everywhere at this point, and a lot of that is due to these no-click experiences that we just talked about. So what does this all mean for healthcare marketers? I want to come back to the social media revolution and share just a few thoughts for you. These are 5 things, that we did a lot of back in the early days of social media that I think you can do today to really start adopting AI in some simple and powerful ways. Conversational, patient-centric content that AI can understand and use. Again, back to the conversational voice searches that we just talked about. Be thinking about ways to create content that hits people in the language that they're already using. Trust and authority for us back in 2010 was a huge thing. We had to make sure that Facebook was seen as a trustworthy source for people. We had to maintain our brand through that channel, and it was a really important piece of our business to make sure that the experience that people had when they came to the hospital was the same one that they would have when they were online. Just mentioned this, but just to say it again quickly, multi-channel and multilingual AI optimization. At the core, this is about meeting people where they are. This is the consumer's world now, and we need to find ways to help them do what they need to do easily. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think we all are feeling some of this discomfort today, as we saw from those quotes from my clients. It is not inherently a comfortable place to be right now, but we have to sort of work our way through that. And have to start small. We have to start smart, but we do have to start today. And I think that the important lesson I've learned from the clients that I work with is that a lot of folks are feeling a little bit of a reticence to get started because it feels overwhelming or it feels like you could make a mistake. But I would just really strongly advocate for starting small and allowing yourself to make some mistakes, but make low risk mistakes. That doesn't have to be doing everything all at once. And the timing really is very important. I don't know if folks saw this yesterday, but even some recent news related to how the current administration is looking at the use of AI. There's been a lot of activity in the last several months around the use of AI related to this administration. And just yesterday, they announced the launching of a new private health tracking system that will have conversational AI baked into it. And the goal, as you can see here, is to try to really bring all of the disparate sources of data across the healthcare ecosystem together in a more unified way that makes it easier for patients to bring their data with them, to get value from the data, right? We've all had the experience where we go to a doctor's office and have to repeat our entire healthcare history. The hope is that something like this will use technology to really help us solve for some of those really simple issues. And so, the last note again is just start today, start simple. And if you'd like to, reach out and have a conversation, I'd be very happy to have a chat with you. But that'll wrap me up for now. So Jess, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, Matt, thank you so much for setting the table. I know when you and I and Diane were talking about this topic, those of us that have been in healthcare marketing and patient acquisition for the last, 20 years or so, this feels like a who moved my cheese moment, right? Like, wait a minute, I've been on this track with SEO and ratings and everything else, and now, oh my gosh, I have to think about this. And what Diane's about to share with you is like, this is the same cheese. It has moved, but now it's about how do we put it on the table with a different plate, right? And so Matt gave us great context of how did we get here, and oh wait, what old is new again, but now Diane, well, welcome to the conversation. And Diane's going to share with us a little bit about how do we take this call to action that Matt just gave us and now apply that with the work that we do. Thanks, Diane.
Hello, everybody. All right, let me cue up my slides here a moment. And we will get started. And thank you, Matt, for getting us started down the path of some of these concepts that we'll go into a little bit more in the next few minutes. But before we jump into AEO, GEO, I know those are things probably a lot of you are anxious to talk about. But let's start with intent. User intent is the why behind the what. So what? Find a quaint, quiet coffee shop in the Cincinnati area. Here's the why behind this user's want. And Perplexity nailed it. It guessed this user is ready to go. It presented everything he might want in one cozy screen. That's something that Matt talked about, and we're just going to keep reiterating that. Because nobody cares about information for its own sake. The customer has a task and they want to complete. They have a task they want to complete and a problem they want to solve. And AI is getting increasingly better at providing that solution that meets intent. That's why 65% of health-related searches now end without a click. But that doesn't mean doom and gloom. It does signal the immediate need to add AI optimization to your current SEO strategy. So AI optimization, it's part AEO and GEO. It's really not an either or, but these terms are flying around, so let's break them down. AEO equals answer engine optimization. And These efforts focus on showing up in traditional SERP features like featured snippets and people also ask. I just had to take a sidebar and point out, I thought this was pretty funny that I asked for top rated OB-GYNs accepting new patients in Cincinnati. And for some reason, Google thinks I need to know the Kardashians OB-GYN. So, even our traditional methods are not always accurate. But AI efforts show up, but our own Stella Hart talks about AI efforts, and she says, use keyword research to identify high interest questions related to your topic, prioritize questions as headings, and use lists in your comment to feature and people also ask. You've seen this before. It continues to work well for Mayo, of course. But at WG Content, we incorporate high interest questions at the end of each blog article, and this increases our odds of appearing. And notice that we don't use the word FAQ as a heading here. That's because we want to take advantage of every opportunity to establish context. That improves SEO and AI visibility. Speaking of FAQs, we do not recommend creating FAQs like this one. These kind of all-inclusive pages, they become dumping grounds for unorganized content. And your questions are better served in context. In this case, better incorporated into the primary care service line section. Here's the downside. FAQs potentially duplicate content from other pages. So they stop helping and they start competing or cannibalizing your SEO and AEO instead of strengthening it. And if you have duplicate content, think about it this way. You have to remember to update it then in multiple places too. So let's get it out of there. Okay, GEO, Generative Engine Optimization. These efforts help you show up in AI responses. So think AI overviews, ChatGPT, Gemini, and the other LLMs. This example here is Google AI mode. AI optimization requires a change in thinking because AI queries, they're longer, the sessions are deeper. And AI has a memory of past conversations, which means it has a better sense of our intent beyond even that immediate prompt. And that memory also enables it to provide more personalized responses. Therefore, GEO feels less like trying to outsmart an algorithm. And that's good news, I think, because AI is built on natural language. It responds to what people respond to: clarity, structure, trust, which means optimization strategies for AI feel a little more intuitive to me and frankly more human than traditional SEO ever did. Like a human, AI looks for trustworthy sources and data. So you need to prioritize EAT. EAT was an established SEO best practice: experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. But if it's not part of your strategy now, it's the time. So we already prioritize EAT by incorporating physician quotes, by citing reputable healthcare publications in a blog. But where else? What else can you do in the interest of GEO? Very Well Health here, you can see that with their byline, they include fact-checked by or medically reviewed by. And this adds credibility to their articles. We also recommend, another thing you can do is keep your author bios up to date. You can update them with new credentials or recognitions that author may have earned. But just as we know it's important to refresh content, think about the author bios as well. AI looks at everything all at once. According to Neil Patel, company tag posts are 3 times more likely to be scraped by AI. So there's an opportunity to build authority within your social media strategy too. Everywhere all at once. Okay, structured content. We already write with a clear structure when we're writing with H1s and H2s, and that makes it easier for AI to find content. But we also need to think a little bit more about how to make it easier for AI to lift your content. Not just find it, but lift it and serve it up in some of those responses. That means bulleted lists, tables, intros, summaries, and short paragraphs where the main point is clearly defined in those first 100 words after a headline. We include key takeaways at the top of every WG content blog. And this is another thing that it's structured and it's easy to lift. Here's an example. Provenance does this as well. Now, TriHealth does a great job of structuring content in their provider bio pages. They have a clear eye on user intent, and they consistently appear in AI search as a result. Each time I'm out there doing tests locally, TriHealth tends to come to the top. So why? Anchor links, they have them here, and they're functional to the user, but they also reiterate to AI what's on the page. You can see they have the information that a patient really wants to know, clearly defined: language, gender, specialty, whether or not they're accepting new patients. That's an important one. And they also include a star rating that AI understands, and that feeds into EAT as too, and gives them authority, expertise. Here's the new norm. Matt showed you a long form prompt already, and that is the new norm: long and specific and personalized. Help me find a highly rated doctor in Cincinnati who specializes in ortho. I'm looking for someone who isn't likely to jump into a surgical solution, and gender doesn't matter. Here, ChatGPT leaned on the ratings in Dr. Thomas's bio. That's a bio we just saw. You can see he's highly rated, 5 out of 5, over 330 reviews, as well as he was mentioned in Cincinnati Magazine. But if you keep going down in the response from ChatGPT, you can see it also reasoned that a provider who takes time to explain things is seen as trustworthy and won't likely to jump into surgery. That's the reasoning factor. That's the human-like element that it brings to the table. But if I really want to know why ChatGPT thinks Dr. Thomas is a good fit for me, I can just ask. And that gives me more clues about GEO. So from this response, I know ChatGPT looked at the rating on the bio, but it also sought out health grades and ZocDoc to back up the claim. Again, EAT, and keep hammering that home, but how it's maybe extended than what we had been thinking about before. I asked Gemini the same question, and it took a different approach, looking at the practice as a whole. You can see key practices known for their conservative, non-surgical approaches. So it's pulling that out of the content within their pages. And in the same way, I asked it, well, I didn't even ask it in this case, actually. It went on to explain its thought process. Because remember, AI optimization is about gaining visibility across all LLMs, excuse me. That's why it's important for marketers and for strategists to focus on GEO that looks for clues across all LLMs, not just Perplexity, not just ChatGPT, but all of them. Okay, let's get back to our list of recommendations here. Free content trapped in PDFs. PDFs, they're typically treated like a black box because it's faster for AI to read well-structured HTML content. So it's important that if any key content that you have buried in a PDF, it's important it also exists on the page. Use schema markup. Okay, schema lives on the technical side of SEO, with kind of the developer, web developer side, but it also helps AI interpret your content correctly. So I think of schema is like labeling boxes. It's a type of code that you add to your website. You can see it here in case you're not familiar with what that really looks like in practice. And this code helps AI connect the dots. So this is a physician. His name is Dr. Shockley. Put him in this box. His medical specialty is orthopedic surgery. Put him in that box. And it helps it organize information. You can find all of these labels at schema.org. Here they're bucketed by a physician. But just remember, schema doesn't work alone. In a recent blog, Search Engine Journal warns us, use schema when it helps clarify the intent or context, but don't rely on it to fix bad content or a disorganized layout. You really need both. Structure, structure, structure. Okay, refresh content often. I talked about it a little bit. Probably most of you on this call already know that. It's a hymn from the SEO songbook, and it that we continue to sing, and it holds true for AI as well. And again, it doesn't have to AI optimization. Don't let it feel so daunting. Think about yourself as a human and the perspective you take. I mean, how likely are you to read an article last dated in 2022 or earlier? And when it comes to AI related topics, I confess that I'm not inclined to even read an article written 6 months ago because things keep changing so much. So AI, like humans, like all of us, likes fresh, original, relevant content. Okay, so let's kind of sum it all up. We're not abandoning SEO. In fact, it's just we need SEO plus some additional AI optimization at this point, because content strategy today is a blend. It's about maximizing visibility across evolving search behaviors, satisfying diverse user intent comprehensively, and ensuring content is future-proof in AI-driven environments. Because as Matt showed us, the trend is continuing down that path. We're going to have more and more AI search, and fewer traditional searches. So we need to start future-proofing now and get ourselves used to those concepts.
Diane, thank you so much. I love this because like the echoing conversation that we're having today is that this feels scary, this feels foreign, but it is exactly the same concepts we've been talking about, right? What is good for SEO, for general search, is going to help you boost on the AEO, GEO side as well. So again, different plate, same cheese moved around the table, but now a different plate we're going to serve it on. Thank you, Diane. And just want to encourage all of you playing along at home. We do have the chat going with some questions. So Diane has a couple questions directed at her, and she'll respond here in a minute. And we'll cover the questions here at the end as well. So I wanted to share from you. So Matt talked about like where did this come from? How's it happening? Diane talked about some of these practical tips and tricks that are making a difference to help you present. I want to share from Care Sherpa's perspective. As many of you may know or may not know, we work on that last mile for your prospective patients to go from the moment of the click or the call to the conversion. And a big part of our partnership is monitoring all that pipeline along the way. Well, we saw, and the reason why I wanted to organize this with my friends Matt and Diane is that there was a clear trend and correlation between what was happening with the patient conversations that we were having on the phone and how that's connected to GPT. And so much so, I actually pulled data from one of our client partners. If we look at here on the left, this was the US daily use of GPTs over time, and we see that exponential curve, right? The green line actually is when we started hearing from patients on the phone, when we inquire, how'd you hear about us, or how'd you find this provider? The rate and instances of GPT being mentioned, and then that same hockey stick. Again, as Matt mentioned, we saw this with adoption, right, prior with social media, etc. But then the surprising thing to me was just the rapid incline in the last, let's say, like 9 to 12 months. And so that's what got our attention to say, obviously, patients are out there. And we weren't alone. You know, you've all have heard the articles. This is one of my favorite, Dr. ChatGPT will see you now, but it's talking about all the different ways that patients as consumers are actually consuming GPT. But then as kind of correlated with Matt mentioned, is that now at least once a month, people are using GPT for health information. And it especially jumps in that elusive younger adult under 30 population. I know those of us on the call, we're all thinking about how do we get the alphas, zillennials, millennials, and all that. And they're the ones who are using that the most, right? It's not the word of mouth that it used to be in terms of finding your providers. Also seeing that people are actively using GPT to manage some aspects of their health. We had a question come in during the prior session asking around, will people turn to GPT more and more? We've actually, on the calls that we've had with patients, had individuals, and I'm going to tell you a story here in a minute, using it where they built their own GPT to upload all their health history, asking questions, and it led them to our provider. And then in 1 in 6 Americans turn to chatbots like GPT for self-diagnosis. Now, marketers on the call, you're like, okay, great, that's fine for clinical, but like, how does that help us with patient acquisition? Well, interestingly enough, we've seen some trends specific to people who start. So this gentleman here started asking GPT about clinical information, but in the series of the chat, it asked, would you like a recommendation for a provider? And that's how he found this provider for his mom. And then others kind of talking about where they've uploaded significant amount of their health history, et cetera, and then got them to ask questions and seek out specialists that they wouldn't have seen before. This one just cracked me up. This young lady actually used GPT to diagnose her cosmetic surgery concerns and then use it as her plan. So as Matt mentioned, as Diane mentioned, like this tsunami, it's here, it's coming, patients are using it today. So our belief is, how do you make sure that you are fully optimized to do that? Matt mentioned perplexity. We also examined the difference of when we've asked from patients whether or not they used what GPT. I'll say I'm focusing on ChatGPT today because many of the patients that we talked to have referenced ChatGPT. But there is a difference between Gemini versus GPT, as Matt mentioned, perplexity. This is a pretty comical video, kind of take from a dermatologist in Arizona that actually used it as a consumer and what the outcome was. So we believe that because GPT is showing the more useful outcomes, that's why we're seeing more and more patients referencing it. So as a story to share with you what we experienced this. So seeing this tsunami with this client partner that we work with is in a fertility specialty. We'd seen the increasing time over time. So we actually went and asked GPT, you know, who is the best IVF doctor in St. Louis, Missouri? And we wanted to get the sense of the ranking for them. So the interesting thing to us here was that GPT actually forced ranked it, right? And it even qualified it, say lots of people define best different ways, but oh, by the way, here's a ranking list to give you. Well, our provider didn't like where they were showing up on this ranking list, so we set about to help them with it. So the core areas that they focused on in a short period of time is some of the themes that you've heard from Matt and from Diane in terms of what are those key areas. So really focusing on transparency and treatments. So building a page dedicated to outcomes data with clearly stated stats and comparing it in a table against industry benchmarks. GPTs love to consume that kind of nice structured data like that. Really being conscientious about third-party reviews and directory cleanup. So there were lots of ancillary third-party services and mentions. So then how do we go through and claim those assets, clean them up so that they're linked to us, and even using additional resources like, you know, monitoring Reddit to make sure how we're talked about on Reddit. Diane kind of nailed this, but talking about GPT-friendly web content. So working with Care Sherpa, we were able to give them weekly insights to what are patients asking about. What are those questions we're hearing every week? What competitor's name is coming up? What are those objections that they have to moving forward? Turning those insights from the calls into blog and video content to directly answer commonly asked prospect questions. But also, you know, if there was a video, making sure that that was copied over to the blog as well to capture that within that structured data set. And then lastly, as Diane mentioned, was embedding into schema markup. Schema can feel very overwhelming, and as Diane mentioned, it's kind of technical, so it's one that, you know, we, working with them, just focused on a couple of core pages to make sure that they were coded appropriately to come up, and so that was the outcome to this. And so this was completed, these 4 simple areas, within less than 60 days. So within that, we immediately saw a response of the rate of folks mentioning GPTs go up. But one of our favorite stories was we had a woman who inputted her medical history, her concerns, and her questions around cost. In the progression of the conversation, because of her specific medical condition, our provider had optimized one of their pages to specifically talk about that and had a series of videos and blog contents about this condition within this environment and his approaches to treatment. He also referenced his expertise in second opinion, and his page and his brand is well known for lower cost options. So this individual in the state of New York found our provider in Missouri, got on a plane and came and completed treatment and procedures with our provider. And she attributed it to her ChatGPT conversation. So this is why we're ringing the alarm bell, right? It's here, it's real. So some of the things that we've heard, if you want to practice this at home with your brand, with your providers, these are some of the common ways that we've heard patients tell us that they have used prompts. Who is the best specialty provider in city? I have XYZ medical condition. What doctor should I consider? Help me find a doctor that supports blank with blank. So using this last one as an example, I'm here in the Nashville market, and I actually use this as an example to say, help me find a doctor that supports perimenopausal women with HRT. So what I found interesting is, first and foremost, is we talk about localized is everything, right? So it was specific to Nashville. And then viewing the sources, showing the first trusted source that had a direct match to my query. Vanderbilt's page specifically talked about perimenopausal, menopausal women and HRT therapies. Not in an elaborate way, but literally with it just bulleted on the page. And so they became my first results. And again, credible resource. They've got credibility across their brand. So GPT gave them extra scoring for that. But what I found interesting was when you look at the results in the ranked order they gave, Vanderbilt was the only major provider who I'd consider in the Nashville market that showed in that top. In Nashville, we have HCA, we have St. Thomas. They were nowhere to be found in this query. And so then dug a little bit deeper, and it says, oh, by the way, here's other highly rated local physicians. And so it gave me their results, not because of their website, not because of their content, but because of a third party referenced it. And that's where we saw 3 of the 4 were St. Thomas and 1 was an HCA. But that came from third party trusted reviews and directory listings. So critical aspects. And then what's also interesting, and you're seeing this with many of the GPTs, is it doesn't just blurt out a response of like, here you go, here's the results, but takes you through the next steps of like, okay, what would you like? Can I help you with choosing the best provider for you, ... And the one I found really intriguing was even diving into insurance coverage. I've seen many instances where patients have uploaded their directory out of their insurance and say, here's the list of all the providers available to me. Help me find those that are, X, Y, Z, and slicing that down. But if we break down this local query at Nashville, the question becomes, what made Vanderbilt rate above St. Thomas and HCA, who are other significant providers here in this market? Well, the first thing was all 3 of them referenced a women's health clinic. So hit that, right, with menopausal, perimenopausal. But the specific diagnosis, right, so perimenopausal, seeking HRT, only Vanderbilt and St. Thomas were able to show on that. And then specific to the HRT treatment, right? So St. Thomas referenced hormonal treatments, but not to a specific area that it then showed for my query. What I also found intriguing is that the directories that were listed for Vanderbilt and Ascension were queried and presented higher than how HCA's directories that were buried connected to the Women's Health Clinic. And lastly, I believe that the reason that Vanderbilt ranked above all the rest is that there was credentials that were linked to outside third-party sources. They brought that back to their brand. So that's that connection of being able to have a credible brand, a credible resource, but also linked and connected to other third parties that show that your brand is credible. So this is some of the trends that we're seeing in the patient as consumers searching. And to us, this series today, starting with Diane and Matt and I, was really trying to give you an opportunity to think through what can I do? So I like to think about it in terms of TLDRs. This was too long, maybe you weren't paying attention. If you're still on with us, this is a good point to tune in because we're going to give you some quick hot takes, right? So as Matt mentioned, start small, scale smart. So just begin with one clear use case, pilot it, and that allows you to build the case with your executives around why this is worthy of investment or why we need to spend the time on X and Y and Z. And then you can build with intention. So you can prioritize the things that are going to help you engage with your community at a much higher rate. As Diane mentioned, I think this is probably one of the biggest takeaways. be the answer, not just the result. So where in the past we could just blurb on a page and have content out there, but now we have to frame it in a way that is answering a specific question, right? Like how, with specific diagnosis or treatment, or answering in a way that a patient would naturally ask the question. Make provider bios AI ready. I think that my local little case study here in Nashville showed that quite a bit, that the provider bios being buried or not connected and not searchable and not indexable, and again, as Diana mentioned, with schema markup, made them where it wasn't as easy for the GPTs to find it. And from our consumer perspective, listen to your prospects. They will tell you what they want, what trends and questions they have, and direct you where to go with your strategy for content. Responding to that in real time keeps you ahead of the curve. And lastly, be transparent and share your credibilities. GPTs look for real results that are linked to credible sources. So it's not just you touting your horn that, hey, we're the best provider out here, but how can you represent with other brands linked back to you? So appreciate all of you joining us today, and I want to make sure you have a chance to connect with us offline if you have additional questions. We're going to go into question and answers here in just a moment, so if you have a question you'd like to submit, please go ahead and do that now and we'll jump into those. But also want to give you an opportunity to let you know, you heard us talk a few times today around the importance of rankings and ratings and reviews. So join us next month. We're going to be actually having more expert panels that are specifically talking about how physician ratings and rankings and reviews, as well as Google, is making a significant impact in giving you tangible tips and tricks of what you can do to take that and apply that to the work that you're doing. And as this would be no good resource unless I offered you, we also have a toolkit for you today. So if you want to scan this code, Matt and I and Diane had put together a kind of quick and dirty, like, hey, here's a guided next steps for you along your journey if you're optimizing for GPTs. So if you submit that, we'll be sure to send that to you after the end of the webinar today. All right, Matt, thanks for coming back on. We got a couple questions we can jump into. All right. So Diana, I'm going to put you in the hot seat first. So how important are images and videos to GEO and AEO? With many AI generated responses displayed in text only, should web page design prioritize the page being pretty?
Well, here's a combination. When we're talking about pretty, you still have people. Maybe they're fewer people, but if you think about where they are in the funnel, once they do get to your website, and if that video can help them at that point in the journey, then you don't want to get rid of them. They do play a part in GEO, AEO if if they are considering all the same principles that we talked about with everything else. You have transcripts. The transcripts are what AI can scrub and figure out, and if it's relating to the topic, if it's relevant, if it's if it's smart, if it's original, it's all of those things. So yeah, you just want to make sure you're smart about the video usage, keywords in it, just like everything else.
Yes, we have found, so the example I gave with the fertility provider is that when we started feeding up the specifically frequently asked questions or questions asked during the call, we made sure to kind of have him add keywords at key times, right, that were specific around the treatment, the procedure. And so as Diane mentioned, with the captions on, with the transcripts, we then had a strategy that every video is followed up with a blog connection to also link out to the video. And so we believe that was a big attribution for that kind of double dipping. But yeah, I think video, we know that GPTs use videos as well, but not as one of the more credible sources, but it is in the realm of sources. Thank you. All right, Matt, I got one for you. What's your take on the recent judgment about free use exception within copyright in association with how AI is taught?
Well, I was hoping you were not going to ask me to answer.
I would say go for it, Matt.
Because I'm not totally sure I understand exactly what it means. Maybe Jamie, you could, I don't know if you're able to pop in here and give us a little more context. But maybe something just maybe but I don't know.
Yeah, good point. So I'm believing that it's something around like how the progressive knowledge building within GPTs, right? So can you load in copyrighted information, have that stayed safe, and then maybe that's the security. But we'll wait for Jamie to give us a little bit more context on that, and we'll follow up. Okay, so Matt, I got another one for you then. So I've used both Perplexity and ChatGPT. I'm using the paid version of GPT almost exclusively. One thing I've noted is that even within the same platform, you may get different answers to the questions. They are using different bots with different personalities, and the answers you receive can vary widely. Totally agree. This makes it tough to get definitive answers. Even when asking how, why, they are recommending one provider over another. Have you encountered this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, part of we're in this interesting place in the world right now where these models are just being developed in real time, right? I mean, this stuff is getting released to the public. Yes, it's been sort of tested and made sure that it's safe for the most part, but I think these things are, the model is to, release often, break things, fix things. So I think you're going to see a lot of this kind of stuff as the market settles. For me, what I always advocate for is using different tools, and it sounds like you're doing some of that already, but is to try different tools. Different tools do different things well. And I think you talked about that a moment ago, Jess, and I think there's value to trying different tools to see where you feel like the best answer is coming from. I showed the perplexity example with the sources. Always check the sources that your LLM is giving you. That will help you sort of triangulate, is this good information or not? So I would just say keep experimenting, but always be gut checking the work no matter what.
Yeah, I liken it to those of us that have been in the SEO game for a while, right? We talk about where Google was the 8,000-pound gorilla, so we always want to optimize for gorilla, but don't ignore Bing and Yahoo in the same realm. So what I have talked to my clients about, and this is just based on patients as consumers talking about it, that we hear ChatGPT being one of the more predominant kind of requests, and so let's focus our efforts on tracking that. But I've even noticed that too, that if I use a paid version versus a free version, same question, I get different results, right? So we know over time, as I think Diane said perfectly, this isn't trying to figure out the black box of Google's kind of algorithms, right? But it is, can we just be consistent so that we're out there?
Right. It's always going to depend on that prompt too. So it's so hard. And again, what were you talking about right before? What's in the memory? There's so many factors that it is hard to duplicate one experience over another. So that's why you do it often. Just look for patterns. That's where we're all at with AEO, GEO strategy. We're getting out there. We're asking the same question monthly, see how it does vary, and looking for patterns.
I got another great question for both of you, and I have got to answer, but I'm gonna let you both answer first. So, like traditional SEO, are there tools that can help you track your results in AI?
Dan, I don't know if you want to go first, but I can answer that as well.
Sure. There are many tools that are coming out on the market now, AI visibility tools, and most of them seem to either kind of analyze your page, say is it GEO friendly, kind of give you a scorecard, a basic scorecard, or they're looking at sentiment. How is your brand showing up across all the LLMs? Is it really what you think it is? Is it have all of your bits of marketing, all your channels, are they all communicating the same thing along with reviews and things that might not be out there in Reddit and all of that? Is it all talking and presenting the same consistent brand or not? But beyond that, one of the things you can look at in Google Analytics, you can start making sure, if you aren't already, tracking ChatGPT, for example. So you can start to see how many leads are coming from other sources than Google. And that's a way to say, track if your changes are having an impact.
Yeah, I would just quickly add to that because I know we're running up against it here, is that, all of the major analytics tools really are increasingly showing AI related results. In fact, I've got a client who is able to actually track the dollar value of some of the activity that they have utilized AI for in the content creation realm, to actually show the tangible financial benefit. And I believe they use Power BI as their tool. So this is increasingly available in all the big tools.
Yeah, and lastly, I'll add there are up and coming tools that are out there. Lots of these technology vendors trying to get ahead of the curve. Where Sherpa sits, right? We're just tracking it the good old-fashioned way. We've got those digital breadcrumbs that are coming from the sources and attribution, but then also like the good old-fashioned, like ask the question, and that's where we started to see that trend going back quite some time because we were asking that and could trend it over time. So we are up against time. We have so many great questions. I'm going to actually reserve some of those that can fit really well for our next topic next month. So again, just reminder for those of you on today that we will have a continuation of this conversation, diving deep into physician ratings as well as your Google, kind of how that shapes your AI readiness. So we appreciate the engaging conversations today, and just appreciate the time you gave us to learn more about GPT. More to come. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.